You know what's worse than losing your money? Watching it disappear while it's still sitting in your bank account. Every morning I'd wake up, and my pension was worth less than the day before. Not because I spent it, because the currency decided I didn't deserve what I'd worked 40 years to earn. If our stories resonate with you, don't forget to like, comment, and tell us where you're watching from. This story was shared with us by a viewer who reached out after watching our channel, saying he finally understood he wasn't alone in what happened to him. I'm Randolph Morrison, Randy to anyone who bothers asking, 65 years old from Victoria, Canada. I thought I'd done everything right. Saved my money, found my paradise, built my new life in Phuket. Then the baht started climbing against the dollar, and everything I'd calculated, everything I'd promised, everything I'd built my future on, started crumbling. And the woman I'd supported through it all had her own plans for survival. I opened my laptop that October morning, like I'd done every month for 3 years, checking to make sure my pension deposit cleared. The routine was comforting, predictable. $2,000 Canadian hitting my account on the first of every month, converting to Thai baht, funding the life I'd built here in Phuket. The life that finally made sense after 40 years of municipal work in Victoria. After a divorce that took half of everything, after winters that felt like they'd never end. I'd sit at my desk in the apartment, coffee going cold beside me, and watch the numbers appear on screen like clockwork. Except this morning the numbers were wrong. I refreshed the page. The numbers stayed wrong. My $2,000 had converted to 15,400 baht. I stared at the screen trying to understand. Last month it was 72,000 baht. The month before that, 71,800. I'd been getting roughly 36 baht per dollar for 3 years, give or take a few hundred baht depending on market fluctuations. But this wasn't a fluctuation. This was a collapse. I opened another tab, pulled up the exchange rate charts, scrolled back through the months. The baht had been strengthening steadily since June, creeping up slowly enough that I hadn't noticed because I wasn't looking. Why would I look? Everything was comfortable. Everything was working. I heard Anchana stirring in the bedroom, her small sounds as she woke up, and my stomach tightened. Anna, 27 years old, from right here in Phuket, worked at a bar on Bangla Road when we met 3 years ago. She'd moved in after 6 months, quit the bar after I promised I could take care of her family. I'd meant it too. At 72,000 baht monthly, I was rich here. Not rich like the high-season tourists dropping money on yachts and bottle service, but comfortable rich. Secure rich. We had a nice 2-bedroom apartment near Kata Beach, 15,000 baht monthly. I had international health insurance, 12,000 monthly. I sent her mother money every month, another 12,000. We ate at decent restaurants, took weekend trips to the islands, lived the life I'd imagined when I sold everything in Victoria and bought a one-way ticket. But now staring at 5,400 baht where there used to be 72,000, I felt my chest constrict. I pulled up a calculator, started doing math I should have done months ago. Rent 15,000, insurance 12,000, Anna's mother 12,000, utilities 3,000. That's 42,000 right there, leaving me 8,400 baht for everything else. Food, transportation, entertainment, savings, emergencies. 8,000 baht was what I used to spend on groceries alone. I was short 21,600 baht every month. That was the math. Simple, brutal, undeniable. I heard Anna's footsteps approaching and closed the laptop too quickly. Like I'd been caught looking at something I shouldn't. She appeared in the doorway wearing one of my old t-shirts, hair messy from sleep, looking young and beautiful, and completely unaware that our world had just shifted under our feet. Morning. "Randy?" she said, smiling, moving toward the kitchen. "You want coffee?" "Already got some," I said, gesturing to the cold cup beside me. My voice came out steadier than I felt. She started making her own coffee, humming something I didn't recognize, and I sat there at my desk watching her, thinking about how to explain exchange rates to someone whose entire financial education came from survival. How do you tell someone that the money hasn't changed, but somehow everything costs more? That the dollar in my account is the same dollar, but the baht is stronger, so my dollars buy fewer baht so we have less money. It sounded insane even in my own head. The financial advisor back in Victoria had shown me charts, projections, told me Thailand was cheap and getting cheaper as the baht weakened. He'd said my pension would stretch forever, that I could live like a king on 2,000 monthly. I'd believed him because I wanted to believe him, because I was 59 and divorced and tired, and the Canadian winter felt like it was crushing me from the inside out. Anna brought her coffee over, sat on the couch, turned on the TV to her Thai soap operas. I watched her settle in, comfortable, secure, trusting that today would be like yesterday, that tomorrow would be like today, and I knew I had to tell her. But not today, not right now. Maybe the rate would correct itself. Maybe this was temporary. Maybe if I just waited a week, checked again next week, it would go back to normal, and none of this would matter. I opened the laptop again, checked the rate one more time. 5.2 baht per dollar. The number sat on the screen like an accusation. I'd been living in paradise for 3 years, ignoring the reality that paradise operates on economics just like everywhere else, and the economics had just fundamentally changed. The ceiling fan spun above me, moving hot air around the room, and I thought about how 3 years ago I'd felt like I'd escaped something. Now I felt like whatever I'd been running from had finally caught up. 3 days passed, and I didn't mention the money. I watched Anna move through the apartment like everything was normal, making breakfast, going to the market, meeting friends for lunch, and I couldn't find the words to tell her that normal was over. I checked the exchange rate every few hours obsessively, hoping each time that it would somehow revert, that I'd misunderstood, that this was all a mistake the banking system would correct. But the rate kept holding steady at 25.2, sometimes dipping to 25.1, never climbing back above 25.5. Each check felt like picking at a wound that wouldn't heal. On the 4th day, Anna asked me about her birthday. We were at our usual restaurant, the one right on the beach where we'd go twice a week for dinner, where the owner knew us by name and always gave us the table with the best sunset view. Anna was eating pad thai. I had my regular grilled fish, and everything felt so desperately normal that I wanted to hold on to it forever. "Randy, I was thinking," she said, twirling noodles around her fork, "for my birthday next month, maybe we go to Koh Samui, just for the weekend. My friend Nitaya says there's beautiful hotel there, right on Choweng Beach." I'd lifted my beer halfway to my mouth and froze there, bottle suspended, looking at her across the table. Her face was hopeful, excited the way she got when she talked about trips or new places. We'd gone to Koh Samui last year for her birthday, stayed in a nice resort, spent 3 days doing nothing but eating and swimming, and pretending we didn't have 38 years between us. "About that," I started, then stopped. "How do you begin this conversation?" "Anna, we need to talk about money." Her fork stopped moving. That's how I knew she understood this wasn't good news. In 3 years together, I'd never started a conversation with those words. What about money? The exchange rate changed. The baht got stronger against the dollar. My pension, it's still $2,000, but it converts to less baht now. A lot less. She put her fork down, looking at me with confusion that felt genuine. "I don't understand. You still get your pension?" "Yes, I still get the pension. Same amount. But when it converts from dollars to baht, I get fewer baht now because the baht is worth more compared to the dollar. Before I was getting 36 baht per dollar. Now I'm getting 25 baht per dollar." I watched her try to process this, saw her lips move slightly as she did math in her head. Hannah wasn't stupid. Despite what some expats might think about bar girls, she understood money, understood transactions, understood value. She'd been supporting her family since she was 17. "So you have less money?" she finally asked. "About $600 less per month. That's like 20,000 baht. Her face changed, not dramatically, just a small shift in her expression, a tightening around her eyes. "How long this happen?" "I don't know. Maybe a few months, maybe longer. Maybe it goes back to normal, maybe it doesn't. Maybe." She picked up her water glass, took a drink, set it down very carefully. "Randy, you don't know." "No one knows. It's currency markets, Anna, it's complicated." She went quiet then, staring at her plate, and I felt the weight of that silence, like physical pressure. The restaurant noise continued around us, other couples laughing, tourists taking photos of the sunset, the waves hitting the beach, all of it feeling like it was happening in a different world from the one Anna and I suddenly occupied. The waiter brought our check and I pulled out my wallet, counted out the bills, and realized with a sick feeling that this meal, which used to represent a small percentage of my monthly budget, now represented a significantly larger one. Everything cost the same in baht, but my baht was worth more dollars now, which meant I was spending more of my actual money on everything. The math made my head hurt. We drove home in silence, Anna staring out the window at the lights of Patong sliding past. When we got to the apartment, she went straight to the bedroom without saying goodnight, and I heard her on the phone immediately, speaking rapid Thai that I couldn't follow. I sat on the couch in the dark, listening to the rhythm of her voice, and I knew exactly who she was calling. Her mother. The woman whose diabetes medication I'd been paying for, whose house repairs I'd funded, whose monthly stipend had become a fixed line item in my budget. I'd never met her in person. She lived up in Isan somewhere, in a village whose name I could never remember, but I'd been sending her 12,000 baht every month for 2 years, and now I was trying to figure out how to keep doing that with 21,600 baht less to work with. The ceiling fan spun overhead, the air conditioner hummed, and I thought about how everything in this apartment, everything in this life, depended on a number I couldn't control fluctuating in a direction I needed it to go. I'd spent 40 years working for the city of Victoria, maintaining parks and public spaces, showing up every day regardless of weather, building toward a pension that would let me retire with dignity. And I'd done it. I'd made it to retirement. I'd escaped to paradise. And now paradise was sending me a bill I hadn't budgeted for. The next 2 weeks felt like living with a stranger. Anna started asking questions she'd never asked before, detailed financial questions that felt like an audit. We'd be watching TV and she'd suddenly ask how much money I had in savings. We'd be making breakfast and she'd ask if I had any other income besides the pension. We'd be in bed and she'd ask if I could get more money from Canada. From my kids, maybe, from some investment I hadn't mentioned. I tried to explain that my savings were modest, maybe 180,000 baht total, meant for emergencies only, that my pension was my only income, and it was fixed, the amount wouldn't change, that my kids had their own lives and families, and asking them for money wasn't something I was willing to do. Each answer seemed to disappoint her more than the last. She stopped cooking the elaborate dinners she used to make, the ones where she'd spend hours in the kitchen making dishes her mother taught her. Instead, she started suggesting we eat street food, cheaper restaurants, meals that cost 60 baht instead of 300. I appreciated the gesture, but it felt ominous, like she was already preparing for a future with less, like she'd accepted that this was our new reality before I'd fully processed it myself. Her phone calls increased. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and hear her in the bathroom talking to someone in hushed Thai. She'd get texts during dinner and excuse herself to make calls from the balcony. When I asked who she was talking to, she'd say her mother, her brother, her friends, and I never knew if she was lying or if all those people really did need her that urgently. One afternoon I came home from the market and found her crying in the bathroom, sitting on the edge of the tub with her face in her hands. I knelt down beside her, asked what was wrong, felt completely helpless when she looked up at me with red eyes. "My mother's sick," she said. "She need medicine. Have to go, doctor, but don't have money." My stomach dropped. How much does she need? 15,000 baht. Maybe more. I don't know. 15,000 baht. That was my entire discretionary budget for the month. But what was I supposed to say? That her mother's health was less important than my financial security? That I couldn't afford to help? I went to the bedroom, pulled 15,000 from my emergency cash, brought it back to the bathroom and put it in her hands. "Tell her to get whatever treatment she needs," I said. Anna looked at the money, then at me and started crying harder. "Thank you, Randy. Thank you so much." She hugged me and I held her, feeling her small frame shake with sobs, and I wondered if I'd just made a noble gesture or a catastrophic mistake. That night I lay in bed doing math again, the ceiling fan spinning overhead, running through numbers that got worse every time I calculated them. 15,000 from savings meant I was down to 165,000 baht emergency fund. My monthly converted pension was holding at 50,400 baht. Fixed expenses were 42,000, leaving 8,400 for everything else. But food was at least 10,000 monthly if we ate cheap. Transportation another 2,000. That meant I was already 3,600 baht short every month, and that was before any unexpected expenses, before any help for Anna's family, before any semblance of the life I'd moved here to live. 3 years ago, I felt like a king in this country. Comfortable, secure, able to help people, able to be generous. Now I felt like I was clinging to a life that was actively trying to shake me loose, and I had no idea how to hold on tighter. 2 weeks after I gave Anna the money for her mother, I printed out a spreadsheet. I'd spent 3 days working on it, making sure every number was accurate, every expense accounted for. I highlighted in red everything we needed to cut immediately if we wanted to survive. No more dinners at restaurants, not even the cheap ones. No more weekend trips, no more hotel stays, no more treating her friends to lunch. We'd need cheaper phone plans, maybe move to a smaller apartment, definitely no more helping her family beyond absolute emergencies. I called Anna to the table, spread the spreadsheet between us, and watched her face as she tried to understand what she was looking at. This is what we spend every month, I explained, pointing to the columns. And this is what I get now, with the new exchange rate. You see the difference? She stared at the paper like it was written in a language she'd never learned. Her finger traced down the lines, stopping at each expense, her lips moving as she read the Thai translations I'd added. This, she said, pointing to the line that said 12,000 baht mother support. Oh, this still go to my mother? I hesitated. This was the moment I'd been dreading. We might need to reduce it temporarily, just until the exchange rate gets better. Anna's face went hard in a way I'd never seen before. She looked up from the spreadsheet, looked directly at me, and I saw something in her eyes that made my chest tight. My family need this money, Randy. My mother have diabetes, medicine expensive, my brother in university. They depend on this. I know, Anna, I know, but look at the numbers. We don't have enough anymore. Something has to change. So my family suffer because the money change. Her voice was rising now, controlled but rising. This not their fault, this not my fault. It's not my fault either, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Circumstances changed. I can't control the currency markets. Anna stood up from the table, the chair scraping loud against the tile. When I meet you, you tell me you can take care of me. You tell me I don't need to work anymore, you have enough money. You promise this to me. The accusation hit me like a physical blow. I had said that. 3 years ago, sitting at a bar on Bangla Road, charmed by this beautiful young woman who laughed at my jokes and made me feel young again, I'd said exactly that. I'd promised I could take care of her. I'd promised she'd never need to work again. And at the time, with my pension converting to 72,000 baht and everything in Thailand feeling impossibly cheap, it had felt true. It had felt easy. I didn't lie to you, I said. The situation changed. That's different from lying. Different how? She picked up the spreadsheet, looked at it one more time, then let it drop back to the table. For me is same. You say you have enough money. Now you say you don't have enough money. What I supposed to think? Anna, please, I'm trying to figure this out, but I need you to understand that we have to make changes, both of us, together. She walked toward the bedroom, stopped in the doorway, turned back to look at me. You make your changes, Randy. I make my changes too. Then she grabbed her purse and walked out of the apartment, leaving me alone with my highlighted spreadsheet and my sinking feeling that everything I'd built here was already finished. Anna came back after midnight. I'd been sitting on the couch in the dark, unable to sleep, unable to do anything but worry and wait. She didn't explain where she'd been, and I didn't ask. We moved around each other like ghosts for the next day, barely speaking, both of us pretending the fight hadn't happened, even though it hung between us like smoke. The second morning, she made coffee like normal, cheerful even, and I thought maybe we'd survived it. Maybe we'd found our way back. Then she sat across from me at the table with her coffee, looked at me directly and said something that made my blood run cold. I'm going back to work. Relief flooded through me for exactly 3 seconds. Then she continued. Back to the bar where we met. The relief drained away, replaced by something that felt like my chest was caving in. The bar? Anna, there are other options. Shops, restaurants, hotels. Plenty of places need workers. She shook her head. Bar work pay 3 times more. With tips, maybe 5 times more. You know this, Randy. You know why bar work pay more. I did know. I knew exactly why bar work paid more, what those tips represented, what she'd be expected to do to earn them. I'd met her at that bar. I'd been one of those men buying drinks, making conversation, leaving tips. I knew the whole transaction. "What if I say no?" I asked. She looked at me with something like pity. "You can't say no, Randy. You don't have the money to say no anymore." And there it was, the truth laid bare. My reduced pension had eliminated my authority in this relationship. I couldn't forbid her from working because I couldn't afford to support her anymore. She was going back to the bar not to help me, but to survive herself, and I had no leverage to stop it, because stopping it meant asking her to be poor with me. "It's temporary," Anna said, her voice softer now. "Just until money situation get better, just 4 nights a week. Nothing changes between us." But everything had already changed. We both knew it. That evening, I watched Anna get ready for her first shift at the bar. She emerged from the bedroom wearing clothes I hadn't seen in 3 years. Tight black dress that showed everything. Heels that made her legs look impossibly long. Makeup heavier than she ever wore for me. She looked beautiful, and it made me feel sick. She kissed me goodbye like this was normal, like she was heading out to any regular job, and I sat in the apartment after the door closed imagining her at the bar, laughing with tourists, men with euros and pounds and yen, stronger currencies, men who could promise things I couldn't promise anymore. Men who weren't 65 and watching their retirement evaporate in real time. I opened a beer at 8 p.m., trying to distract myself with TV. Opened another at 9 when the thoughts got worse. By 11 I'd lost count, sitting in the dark, watching my phone, waiting for updates that didn't come. Anna came home at 3 in the morning. I heard her key in the lock, pretended to be asleep in bed as she moved through the apartment. She went straight to the bathroom and I heard the shower run for 20 minutes. When she finally came to bed, she smelled like perfume and cigarettes, and something I couldn't quite identify but recognized anyway. She settled beside me, her breathing evening out into sleep. And I lay there in the dark thinking about how 3 years ago I'd rescued her from that bar, from that life. And now I'd sent her right back to it. 3 weeks into Anna working at the bar, and I started noticing things that didn't add up. She'd come home with cash, but it disappeared almost immediately. Her family needed money. Her phone needed upgrading. She needed new clothes for work. The bar owner required the girls to look expensive, even though they weren't paid expensive. Meanwhile, my pension kept converting to less. The baht had strengthened again. Now I was getting 48,000 per month, down another 2,400 from October. I was checking the exchange rate multiple times per day now, obsessively, watching my financial security evaporate in real time like ice melting under tropical sun. I joined online forums for expats, places where men like me gathered to complain about the baht, about prices, about Thai girlfriends who left when the money ran out. Hundreds of men in identical situations, all of us watching our fixed incomes shrink against the rising currency, all of us trying to figure out if we should stay or give up and go home. The forums were depressing but addictive. I'd read their stories late at night while Anna was at work, seeing my future in their words. Some had already returned to their home countries, defeated. Others had moved to cheaper regions like Isan or Cambodia, where costs were lower. Some had found Thai girlfriends with actual jobs who could contribute, completely reversing the financial dynamic that brought them to Southeast Asia in the first place. None of the options felt good. Anna started coming home later and later. 4 a.m., then 5, once not until dawn was breaking over the ocean. She was always vague about her earnings when I asked. "Some night good, some night not good," she'd say, shrugging, moving past the question. I didn't press. I was terrified of what the truth might be. The bar she worked at was known for more than drinks. Everyone knew. The girls who worked there, some of them had arrangements with regular customers, hotel visits, extended dates. I'd been that customer once, 3 years ago, the man taking a bar girl out for the evening, pretending it was romance instead of transaction. One morning I was looking for aspirin in Anna's purse and found a business card. Nice hotel in Patong, one of the expensive ones overlooking the beach. Someone had written a room number on the back in pen. I stared at it for 10 minutes, turning it over in my hands, trying to decide if this was evidence or just a coincidence. Maybe someone had given her the card for a legitimate reason. Maybe she'd found it on the street. Maybe I was paranoid from stress and lack of sleep. I put the card back exactly where I'd found it, went to the bathroom and threw up. That afternoon I walked to the beach and sat in the sand watching tourists. Europeans mostly. Germans and Brits and Scandinavians. Their currency still strong against the baht, able to afford the Thailand I couldn't access anymore. They walked past holding expensive drinks, laughing, taking photos, living the vacation I used to live as regular life. A Canadian couple stopped and asked me for restaurant recommendations. Young couple, probably early 30s, honeymooners maybe. I gave them the names of places I used to go to, but couldn't afford anymore. Told them to try the grilled fish at the beach restaurant, get a table at sunset. Order the Singer beer because it pairs well with seafood. They thanked me, said they'd heard Phuket was amazing, walked away laughing and holding hands. I sat there watching them disappear into the tourist crowds and felt like a ghost haunting my own former life. I woke up one Tuesday morning and Anna was packing a suitcase. Not the small bag she took to the bar, but her actual travel suitcase, the big one we'd used for trips to the islands. I sat up in bed, confused, watching her fold clothes methodically. "Where are you going?" "Pattaya." "Just few days." "My friend from bar, she invite me." "Which friend?" Anna gave me a name I didn't recognize, one of the girls from work I'd never met. "She going for long weekend? Ask if I want to come?" "Do you need money?" She didn't look up from her packing. "No, she pay for everything." Her friend he pay, and there it was. Her friend's friend. The kind of friend who pays for weekend trips to Pattaya, who books hotel rooms, who takes care of everything in exchange for company that wasn't just conversation. I understood exactly what Anna wasn't saying. "Don't go," I said. The words came out quieter than I'd intended. Anna stopped packing, turned to look at me. "Randy, please, don't go." She sat down on the edge of the bed, and for a moment I thought she was reconsidering. Then she took my hand, held it gently, and said the thing that broke something fundamental inside me. "Randy, I'm 27 years old. I didn't plan to spend my youth watching spreadsheets with a man who can't afford to take me anywhere anymore." The words hit like physical blows. Youth, watching spreadsheets. Can't afford. Each phrase landed precisely, cutting through every illusion I'd been maintaining about what we were, what we'd been, what I'd meant to her. "Is this about the money or about us?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "In Thailand, those are the same thing." She said it matter-of-factly, not cruel, just honest. Like she was explaining a basic truth I should have understood from the beginning. She loved me, probably. But love didn't pay her mother's medical bills. Love didn't fund her brother's university tuition. Love didn't secure her future when she had no degree, no savings, no backup plan except her youth and her looks, and the men willing to pay for both. "If the currency goes back to normal," she continued, "maybe things can go back to how they were. But right now I need to think about my survival. You understand?" I nodded because what else could I do? I understood. I understood too well. She finished packing while I sat on the bed, paralyzed, watching her zip up the suitcase. She kissed my forehead before leaving, gentle, almost maternal. "I'll be back Sunday," she said. The door closed and I sat in the silence of the apartment, understanding that this was a preview of my future. A woman who loved me but couldn't afford to stay with me, leaving incrementally until one day she just wouldn't come back. And I wouldn't blame her because I'd seen her bills, her obligations, her reality. I was asking her to be poor with me, and that was a bigger ask than love could sustain. The apartment felt enormous without Anna. I'd never noticed how much space two people take up until it was just me. Every room echoed. Every sound I made seemed loud and lonely. I spent the week checking my phone obsessively, hoping for messages that came rarely and said nothing meaningful. Having fun. Weather nice. Miss you. Generic text that could mean anything or nothing. I researched currency exchange for hours, reading articles about Thai economic policy, US Federal Reserve decisions, Chinese market influences, trying to find hope that the baht would weaken again, that I'd wake up one morning and my pension would convert to 72,000 like before and everything would reset. The articles suggested the strengthening could continue for years. The Thai economy was strong, tourism recovering, exports increasing. The dollar was weak, American debt climbing, interest rates unstable. All the factors that made the baht strong made my pension weak and none of them were changing anytime soon. The expat forums got darker the longer I read them. Men talking about running out of money completely, about Thai girlfriends who left the day the bank account emptied, about being stuck in Thailand without funds to leave, unable to afford the flight home, sleeping in cheap guest houses and teaching English under the table for survival money. One guy wrote about having a heart attack in Chiang Mai and the hospital keeping his passport until his bill was paid. His kids had to wire money from Australia. He returned home broke and defeated, the Thailand dream completely shattered. I read his story 3 times, seeing my potential future in every paragraph. One night I calculated how long my savings would last if I supplemented my pension every month. The math was brutal. I had 165,000 baht in emergency savings after giving Anna money for her mother. My pension converted to 48,000 monthly. My fixed expenses were 42,000. That left 6,000 for food, transportation, everything else. But realistically, I needed at least 12,000 monthly for basics. So I was 6,000 short every month, which meant my savings would last 27 months. 27 months until I had nothing. And that assumed no medical emergencies, no unexpected expenses, no increases in rent or utilities, no helping Anna's family, no semblance of the life that made living here worthwhile. 27 months until I'd be broke in a foreign country at 65 years old. I sat at my laptop staring at that number, 27, and felt something inside me crack. I was too old to work, too proud to ask my kids for money, too stubborn to admit defeat and go home, but too scared to stay and watch everything unravel. I ordered delivery food that night, cheap fried rice that tasted like cardboard, ate it alone on the couch, watching sunset from the balcony that overlooked the Andaman Sea. This body of water I'd found so beautiful 3 years ago. The sunset was the same. The water was the same. But I was different now, fundamentally changed by the slow erosion of security, watching paradise become prison 1 reduced baht at a time. Anna came back Sunday evening, tanned and wearing clothes I didn't buy. A new dress, new sandals, new sunglasses sitting on top of her head. She looked relaxed and happy and distant, checking her phone constantly, smiling at messages I couldn't see. I asked how the trip was and she said, fine, busy, tiring. I didn't ask the questions I wanted to ask. What did you do? Who were you with? How much did he pay? We sat through a silent dinner, pad crapo I'd ordered from the restaurant downstairs, eating without really tasting anything. Then Atta put down her fork, looked at me directly and said the thing I'd been dreading since she'd left. Randy, we need to talk. My stomach dropped. Those words never preceded anything good. She moved to the couch, patted the cushion beside her, and I followed like I was walking to my own execution. She took my hand when I sat down, and the gentleness of the gesture told me this was very bad. My situation has become impossible, she started, speaking slowly like she'd practiced this. My family obligations haven't decreased just because your income has. My mother's still sick. My brother's still in university. They still need money every month. I know, I said. I'm trying to figure it out. I was offered an opportunity in Pattaya, a bar there, better than the one here. Guaranteed salary plus commission. Good money, Randy. Enough to support my family and save for my future. Is it just bar work? I asked, even though I knew the answer. Anna's silence was her response. We sat there holding hands, both of us understanding what she wasn't saying. The bar in Pattaya would pay her well because she'd be expected to do more than serve drinks. She'd be available, charming, willing to leave with customers who paid enough. It was the same work she'd been doing before I met her, before I'd promised her a different life. I care about you deeply, Anna continued, but I can't sacrifice my security for a relationship that's become financially unstable. You understand? I did understand. I understood too much, too clearly. She was doing exactly what made sense for her survival. I was the romantic thinking love, could overcome economic reality. She was the pragmatist, knowing that women like her didn't have the luxury of romance when their families depended on them for survival. Is there any scenario where you stay? I asked. Anna looked at me with genuine sadness. Only if the currency changes dramatically. And we both know that's not happening. So this is it? I'll move out gradually. Over the next 2 weeks. We can still talk, still see each other when I visit Phuket. Nothing has to be ugly. I wanted to beg. I wanted to promise I'd find more money somewhere, somehow. But my masculine pride wouldn't let me. Begging wouldn't change the math. Begging wouldn't make my pension convert to more baht. Begging would just make me pathetic in addition to poor. I understand, I said instead. I want you to be happy. Anna started crying then, real tears, not manipulative ones. She hugged me and I held her, both of us grieving the end of something that had probably been temporary from the start, but felt permanent in the middle. She cried into my shoulder, and I stared at the wall, feeling 65 years old and completely unmoored, watching the last piece of my Thailand dream walk away because I couldn't afford to keep it. Anna's departure happened in pieces over 10 days. First, her clothes disappeared from the closet, leaving empty hangers that looked accusatory. Then her toiletries vanished from the bathroom, the shelf suddenly bare where her lotions and makeup had lived. Her cooking supplies left next, the wok and special knives she'd brought from her mother's house. Then the small decorative items, the Buddha statues and silk cushions and framed photos that had made the apartment feel like home instead of just a rental. Each removal made the space emptier, more temporary, more like the holding cell it had always technically been. I helped her pack, playing the supportive ex-boyfriend role because I didn't know what else to do. We were civil, almost friendly, like we were roommates ending a lease rather than lovers ending a relationship. Her new job in Pattaya started the following Monday. She'd be working at a bar called Sugar, one of the upscale places that catered to wealthy, foreigners and rich Thais. The kind of place where drinks cost 500 baht and the girls wore designer dresses and the whole thing pretended to be sophisticated even though everyone knew what was really for sale. The night before she left permanently, we slept together one final time. It felt both intimate and like a transaction closing, like we were finalizing terms. In the morning, her friend picked her up in a car I didn't recognize. Nice car, new Toyota, driven by a Thai man who looked at me with something like pity. Anna kissed me goodbye and promised to call, and I stood in the doorway watching her put her suitcases in the trunk, get in the passenger seat, drive away without looking back. I stood there for 5 minutes after the car disappeared, then went inside and closed the door, and understood that phase of my life was finished. The apartment echoed now in a way it never had before. I realized how much of my daily routine had revolved around Anna's presence. Cooking together, her teaching me Thai words I'd immediately forget. Watching her soap operas, me not understanding anything but enjoying her reactions. Her phone conversations in rapid Thai that I couldn't follow, but found comforting as background noise. Now it was silent except for the ceiling fan and the distant traffic and my own breathing. I sat on the couch in the empty apartment and checked my bank account out of habit. Pension deposit had just arrived. 37,200 baht. I was down to 47,200 monthly. I'd lost 24,800 baht of buying power since October. My emergency savings were down to 142,000 after supplementing expenses and helping Anna's family. The math was simple and brutal and unavoidable. I was financially drowning in slow motion, watching the numbers decrease month by month while I sat helpless, unable to earn more, unable to cut enough, unable to do anything except watch my security evaporate like water in the Thai heat. 2 weeks after Anna left, I gave notice on my apartment. I couldn't afford 15,000 baht monthly rent anymore. I found a studio in a Thai neighborhood, far from the tourist beaches, the kind of place where foreigners didn't usually live, where the street dogs slept in the road, and the neighbors stared at the lone farang with curiosity and suspicion. 8,000 baht monthly rent, 1 room with a bathroom, kitchenette in the corner, window that looked at the concrete wall of the building next door. Hot, small, loud with motorbike sounds and Thai music from the karaoke bar downstairs. But it was 7,000 baht cheaper, and that 7,000 baht was the difference between surviving and not surviving. I sold my motorbike, the nice PCX I'd bought my first year here when I felt rich and confident. Got 35,000 baht for it, less than I'd paid but more than I expected. The money went straight into my emergency fund, bringing it back to 177,000. I started using song thews and walking. My daily life shrank to a 2-kilometer radius around the studio. I cancelled my international health insurance, the policy that had covered me in any hospital in Asia. 12,000 baht monthly I couldn't afford anymore. Switched to basic Thai insurance with massive deductibles. the kind that covered catastrophic emergencies, but nothing routine. 3,500 baht monthly. It terrified me, but I had no choice. I stopped buying imported foods, learned to eat what locals ate at prices locals paid. Rice and chicken from street vendors, 40 baht per meal. Fruit from the market, cheap and ripe. I learned to cook simple Thai food in my kitchenette, following YouTube videos, making dishes that tasted nothing like when Anna had made them, but filled my stomach for a fraction of restaurant costs. My daily budget became 400 baht total. Food, transportation, everything. Some days I came in under, saved 50 or 60 baht, felt victorious about it like I'd won something instead of just managed to survive another day. The expat lifestyle I'd moved to Thailand for no longer existed for me. I avoided the beach areas completely, couldn't stand watching tourists and better-financed expats living the life I used to have. Seeing them felt like watching a movie of my own past, painful and pointless. Anna called occasionally. Brief calls, always mentioning how busy she was. I never asked about her work. Once she sent me a photo from a yacht party, her in a bikini holding champagne, surrounded by people who looked rich and young and carefree. I stared at that photo for an hour. This woman I'd thought would be my companion through old age, now in a world I couldn't access or afford, or even understand anymore. She was 27 and beautiful and pragmatic, and she'd made the choice that made sense for her survival. I was 65 and broke and foolish, and I'd made all the wrong choices despite thinking I was planning carefully. I made one friend in my new neighborhood, another expat, Australian man named Fletcher, maybe 70 years old, living in a studio even smaller than mine. He survived on 25,000 baht monthly somehow. We'd drink cheap whiskey together on his tiny balcony, complaining about the baht, about the Thai government, about the women who left when the money ran out. Depressing solidarity, but it was someone who understood without me having to explain. Fletcher told me stories about other expats in worse situations. Guys teaching English under the table for 300 baht per hour. Guys doing visa runs to Cambodia for richer expats, earning a few thousand baht per trip. Guys who'd completely run out of money and were sleeping in temple grounds, eating one meal a day. Stuck in Thailand because they couldn't afford the flight home. I listened to his stories and felt my future in them. At 65, I was too old to start hustling, too proud to beg, too stubborn to give up, but running out of options fast. 6 months into my reduced circumstances, I developed a cough that wouldn't quit. Dry, persistent, getting worse every day. I ignored it for 3 weeks, telling myself it was just a cold, allergies, the pollution from living near a main road. Fletcher finally convinced me to see a doctor when he heard me coughing through the wall between our apartments. The clinic was basic, Thai run, no English-speaking doctors. I showed up with my symptoms written on my phone in Thai, translated by Google. The doctor examined me, listened to my lungs, wrote a prescription for antibiotics and cough syrup. Total cost, 8,500 baht. My Thai insurance wouldn't cover it because I hadn't met my 20,000 baht deductible yet. I paid in cash and watched my emergency savings drop to 145,000 baht. The antibiotics helped initially. The cough subsided. I thought I was better. 2 weeks later it came back worse. Deeper, wetter, accompanied by chest pain that made breathing difficult. I went back to the clinic, different doctor this time. He looked concerned, ordered chest x-rays. The x-rays showed fluid in my lungs, possibly pneumonia, possibly something worse. He prescribed stronger antibiotics, steroids, follow-up in 1 week, another 12,000 baht. My insurance still wouldn't cover it, still under my deductible. I paid and watched my emergency savings drop to 133,000 baht. The doctor strongly recommended seeing a specialist if the symptoms didn't improve. Mentioned possible hospitalization if the infection worsened. Gave me a referral to Phuket International Hospital, the expensive private hospital where wealthy tourists and expats went. I left the clinic and sat on a bench outside, doing math in my head that made me want to vomit. My savings were 133,000 baht. My monthly pension converted to 47,000 baht. My minimal living expenses were 45,000 monthly if I was extremely careful. That left 2,000 baht cushion, basically nothing. If I needed serious medical care, hospitalization, specialist treatment, I was finished. Completely broke with no way to recover. I'd read the stories on the Expat forums, medical bankruptcies, hospitals holding passports until bills were paid, families wiring emergency money, men returning to their home countries defeated, broken, traumatized by how quickly everything fell apart. I sat on that bench in the afternoon heat and thought about the international insurance I'd cancelled to save money, about the comfortable financial buffer I used to have, about how security becomes scarcity, so gradually you don't notice until you're already drowning. That night I did something I hadn't done in 8 months. I called my daughter in Vancouver, Sarah, 42 years old, married, 2 kids, worked as a nurse at Vancouver General. We'd grown apart over the years, especially after I'd moved to Thailand. Even more after she'd met Anna through video calls and clearly disapproved without saying it directly. "Dad," she answered, surprised. "Everything okay?" Yeah, everything's fine, just wanted to hear your voice. It's been like 8 months since we talked. Not accusatory, just factual. I know, I'm sorry. Time gets away from me here." She told me about her kids, my grandchildren who I barely knew anymore, about her job at the hospital, the overtime she was working, her husband's promotion. I listened to her describe the stable middle-class Canadian life she'd built, the kind of life I'd abandoned when I moved to Thailand. When she asked how I was doing, if I was happy, I lied. "Yeah, paradise is great. Just wanted to check in." We talked for 30 minutes, and I almost told her the truth, almost explained about the exchange rate, about Anna leaving, about being broke and sick and terrified. But I couldn't admit failure to my daughter, couldn't ask for help, couldn't let her know that her father, who'd abandoned his family for a Thai bar girl, was now reaping exactly what he'd sown. After we hung up, I sat in my studio apartment, in the dark, listening to Thai karaoke bleeding through the floor, and cried for the first time since I'd arrived in Thailand 3 years ago. I spent 2 weeks wrestling with the decision to leave Thailand. Every morning I'd wake up thinking today I'd book the flight, today I'd admit defeat. Then I'd talk myself out of it, convince myself to hold on 1 more month, wait and see if the exchange rate improved. Returning to Canada meant admitting failure to everyone. To my kids who'd warned me this retirement plan was foolish, to my ex-wife who'd said I was having a midlife crisis, to the friends back in Victoria who'd watched me sell everything and move to paradise. It meant going back to cold weather, to expensive rent, to the same dull middle-class existence I'd escaped. Going back at 65, broke, with no home, no plan, dependent on my kids' charity. It felt like dying, but staying meant depleting my savings on medical care. Gambling that my health would hold, gambling that the exchange rate would improve, potentially ending up stranded and broke in a foreign country with no safety net. One Tuesday morning, I messaged Anna. First time I'd initiated contact in weeks. "I'm thinking about leaving Thailand, going back to Canada." She called me immediately. First real phone conversation we'd had since she'd moved to Pattaya. "Randy, really? You're leaving?" "Maybe. I don't know. The money situation isn't getting better." She was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry, I wish things had worked out differently." "Not your fault. Currency markets aren't anyone's fault." "I think about you," she said softly. "I hope you're okay." "Are you happy?" I asked, even though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. Long pause. "I'm surviving. It's not the same thing." We talked for 20 minutes, more honest than we'd been in months. She told me the work in Pattaya was hard, that the money was good, but came with costs she didn't want to detail. I told her about my health, about my shrinking savings, about feeling like I was fighting a battle I'd already lost. We said goodbye with warmth and sadness, and I felt worse after hanging up than before I'd called. That afternoon I booked a one-way ticket to Vancouver, 3 weeks out, refundable if I changed my mind. 42,000 baht, almost my entire month's pension. I stared at the confirmation email for an hour, then went next door to tell Fletcher. He was on his balcony with his whiskey when I knocked. "I'm leaving," I told him. "Going back to Canada." Fletcher poured me a drink without asking. "When?" 3 weeks. "Flights booked." "Refundable?" "Yeah. You'll cancel it," he said. "Most guys do. Book the flight, feel better having an escape plan, then convince themselves to stay. I don't think so, not this time. Fletcher looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw recognition in his eyes. You look bad, mate, sick. You need proper medical care. Probably. Can't get that here, not on our budgets. I know. He raised his glass. To making the smart choice even when it feels like giving up. We drank cheap whiskey on his balcony, watching the sun set over the neighborhood that had become my reduced world. Fletcher threw me a small goodbye party the next week. 5 expats in his cramped apartment, all of us in similar situations, all of us hanging on by threads. They shared stories about men who'd gone home, speculating about who'd make it and who'd eventually return to Thailand broke and defeated again. I listened and realized this was what the retirement dream actually looked like for most men. Not luxury and beautiful women, not endless beach days and cheap living, but cost-cutting and compromise and eventually retreat. The lucky ones retreated while they still could. The unlucky ones stayed until they had no choice, until they were deported or hospitalized or worse. My last week in Thailand felt like watching my own funeral. I sold most of my belongings for whatever I could get. Furniture, kitchen stuff, clothes I wouldn't need in Canadian winter. Everything went for a fraction of what I'd paid, but I needed the cash. My studio apartment emptied out until it was just a mattress on the floor and my 2 suitcases. I walked to the beach one final time, the first time I'd been there in months. Sat in the sand watching sunset, remembering my first week in Thailand 3 years ago, when everything felt possible and affordable, and like I'd finally figured out how to live. The sky was the same orange and pink. The Andaman Sea was the same turquoise blue. The tourists were the same, laughing and taking photos and living their vacations. But I was different now, older, broker, wiser in ways I wished I wasn't. I thought about Anna in Pattaya, about the apartment we'd shared, about the version of myself who'd thought loving someone from a different economic reality could work if I just had enough money. But enough money became not enough when the currency shifted, and I'd learned that poverty is relative, and security is temporary, and paradise has a price that can change without warning. The flight to Vancouver left early morning. Fletcher drove me to the airport in his old pickup truck. Didn't say much because there wasn't much to say. At departures, we shook hands, and he told me I was doing the right thing. I wasn't sure I believed him. Felt more like I was retreating, defeated, admitting I'd been wrong about everything. The plane took off, and I watched Thailand disappear below me through the window. This country that had given me 3 years of feeling young again, of feeling desired and comfortable and free from the constraints of Western middle-class life. And then slowly, methodically, economically, it had priced me out like a landlord raising rent until you can't afford to stay anymore. I arrived in Vancouver to rain. Of course, rain. My daughter Sarah was at arrivals, looking worried, scanning the crowd until she spotted me. When she did, her face changed, shock and concern that she tried to hide but couldn't completely. "Dad," she said, hugging me. "You look old," I finished. "I know." She drove me to her house in Surrey, talking about the guest room she'd set up, about how long I could stay, about helping me figure out my next steps. She didn't ask questions about why I was back, or what had happened to my paradise retirement. She'd probably guessed most of it. During dinner with her family, my son-in-law Greg and my grandchildren Emma and Lucas, I tried to act normal, told stories about Thailand that made it sound fun and exotic rather than desperate and isolating. Greg asked about the beaches, and I described Kata Beach at sunset. Emma asked if I'd seen elephants, and I lied and said yes, even though I'd never left Phuket in 3 years. Lucas, 9 years old, asked the question none of the adults would. "Grandpa, was Thailand fun?" I looked at him, this kid who barely knew me, who'd grown up while I was gone chasing something I couldn't name. "Yeah, buddy. Very fun." And I meant it despite everything. It had been fun for a while, when the money was flowing and Anna was happy, and I felt like I'd escaped the trap of aging Western masculinity. Before the Baht strengthened and reality reasserted itself, and I learned that geographic cures don't work when the problems are economic. That night I lay in Sarah's guest room, listening to Canadian rain on the window, softer than tropical rain, colder, familiar in a way that hurt. I opened my laptop one final time, checked the exchange rate out of habit. 46,800 baht per $2,000, still dropping, still getting worse. I closed the laptop and stared at the ceiling of my daughter's guest room, thinking about all the men still in Thailand, still calculating, still checking exchange rates multiple times daily, still hoping the numbers would somehow shift in their favor. Some would make it. Some wouldn't. Some would find Thai women with money who could support them, reversing the dynamic completely. Some would move to cheaper countries, chasing affordability like it was a moving target. Some would end up deported or hospitalized or dead. Another cautionary tale on the expat forums. But that wasn't my story anymore. My story was about an older man who learned that paradise has a price. And sometimes that price changes without warning, without mercy, without giving you time to adjust. And when it does, you have to decide what you're willing to lose to stay. How much dignity you'll sacrifice. How much security you'll gamble. How much of yourself you'll give away for the privilege of pretending you're still the person you were when you first arrived. I decided I wasn't willing to lose anymore. Not my health. Not my last savings. Not my relationship with my daughter and grandchildren. So I left, retreated, gave up. Went home, whatever you want to call it. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep in a bed that was comfortable and safe and felt nothing like home. Listening to rain and thinking about the ceiling fan in my studio apartment in Phuket, still spinning, still moving hot air in circles, still waiting for the next broke expat to lie under it and do the same math I'd done and arrive at the same impossible conclusion.